Cancer. You don't see it yet. That's not a flaw in you, and it's not a sign that nothing is happening. It's simply the nature of how the biggest things arrive. They assemble themselves out of sight first, in the parts of your life you're not looking at, and only later do they step into the light where you can finally recognize them. So I want to begin by telling you that the not seeing is normal. The things that are about to reshape your circumstances are still in the phase where they don't announce themselves, and I'm going to spend our time together helping you learn to sense them anyway. Let me explain why abundance is so easy to miss in its early stages, because understanding this will change how you move through the coming stretch. Wealth, when it's forming, rarely looks like wealth. It looks like a small opportunity you almost dismissed. It looks like an ordinary conversation that turns out to matter. It looks like a skill you've had for years and never valued properly. The eye is trained to expect prosperity to arrive dramatically with obvious signs, and so it scans right past the quiet, unremarkable moments where prosperity actually takes root. The real thing grows in disguise. Consider the seeds you've already planted, most of which you've forgotten about. Every effort you made that didn't seem to pay off, every bit of care you put into your work, every time you showed up when it would have been easier not to, none of that vanished. It went into the ground. And things planted in the ground don't sprout on the timeline our impatience demands. They sprout when the conditions are right, often long after we've stopped watching for them. What I sense is that a whole field of your old efforts is quietly reaching the stage where it breaks the surface, and you're about to be surprised by a harvest you didn't remember sowing. There's a door that has been opening slowly, so slowly that from where you stand, it still looks closed, but it isn't. The hinge has been turning by degrees, and the gap has been widening, and light has begun to come through the edge of it, even if you haven't noticed the room beyond growing brighter. This is the kind of shift that Sarah Angel Tarot exists to help you perceive the movement that's too gradual to catch in the moment, but unmistakable once someone points it out. An opportunity has been forming in a place you weren't watching, and it's nearly ready to swing fully open. I want to talk about your relationship with your own worth, because this is the soil everything else grows in. Somewhere along the way, you may have absorbed the idea that you have to struggle for every good thing, that abundance is something reserved for other people, that your role is to make do with less. That belief acts like a ceiling. It caps what you'll allow yourself to reach for and receive. And what I sense happening within you now is that the ceiling is cracking. A quieter, truer sense of your own value is rising up underneath it. And as it rises, the ceiling loses its power. You're beginning to believe in the deep places that you're allowed to have more. Let me offer you a reframe about money itself, because how you hold the idea of it shapes how it moves in your life. Money isn't a scarce, hostile thing that must be wrestled from a stingy world. It's closer to energy. It moves toward attention, toward openness, toward those who have made peace with receiving it. When you relate to money with fear and clenching, you constrict the very channel it would flow through. But when you relax your grip, when you stop treating it as an enemy and start treating it as a welcome guest, the channel widens. And I sense your grip loosening, your fear around it softening, which is precisely the condition under which more of it can come. There's an old story about scarcity that you've been carrying, and it's beginning to dissolve. Perhaps you learned early that there was never quite enough, that wanting was dangerous, that hoping for plenty only set you up to be disappointed. That story made sense once it protected you. It kept your expectations low enough to survive lean stretches. But it has outlived its usefulness, and part of what's happening now is that you're setting it down. As the scarcity story loosens its hold, a different story becomes possible, one in which there is enough, in which more is on its way, in which you get to stop bracing against lack. Look around at the resources already within your reach, because I sense there are assets in your life you've been overlooking. Not just money, but capacities, things you know how to do, connections you've made, knowledge you've accumulated, qualities in yourself that have real value in the world. You may have grown so used to these that you've stopped seeing them as valuable at all. but others don't see them the way you do. What feels ordinary to you can be precisely what someone else needs and is willing to pay for. Part of what's coming is a fresh recognition of the value you've been sitting on, a sudden awareness of gold in your own hands. Now let me describe a convergence, because what makes this stretch different isn't one single stream, but the way several separate streams are beginning to meet. There's the thread of your past efforts ripening. There's the thread of an opportunity forming. There's the thread of your own worth expanding, and there's the thread of your fear loosening. Each of these has been developing on its own, in its own corner of your life. And what I sense is that they're being drawn toward a single point where they'll join. When separate streams converge, they become a river, and a river has a force that no single stream possesses. That joining is what's approaching. There's a momentum that builds once abundance begins to move, and it's worth understanding so you'll recognize it when it starts. The first gains are often the hardest and the slowest because they have to overcome the inertia of a situation that's been stuck. But once things begin to move, they tend to move more easily. One good outcome creates the conditions for the next. A small success opens the door to a larger one. And what began as a trickle gathers into a steadier flow. I sense you're near the point where the initial inertia finally breaks and momentum takes over. Past that point, you'll find you have to push far less than you're used to because the thing has begun to roll under its own weight. Here's something crucial about readiness, because abundance requires a container able to hold it. It isn't enough for good things to arrive. You have to be capable of receiving them without immediately letting them slip through your fingers. And part of what's been happening in you, quietly, is an expansion of your capacity to receive. You're becoming someone who can accept good fortune without collapsing under guilt about deserving it, without self-sabotaging it away, without insisting there must be a catch. That growing capacity is invisible from the outside, but it's the difference between abundance that arrives and leaves and abundance that arrives and stays. I sense that some of what's coming will arrive through an unexpected channel, and I want you to keep your peripheral vision open. The mind likes to decide in advance where good things will come from. It fixes on one source, one plan, one anticipated route, and then waits there. But abundance is playful and often enters through the side you weren't guarding. It may come through a person you didn't expect to matter, an avenue you'd written off, a direction you'd never considered. So hold your plans loosely. Let the good come however it wants to come. Rather than insisting it, use the door you left open for it. I sense a figure of support somewhere in this picture, someone who sees your value and is inclined to help you rise. It may be a person already in your life whose regard for you runs deeper than you've realized, or someone not yet arrived who will take a genuine interest in your prospects. Almost no one climbs entirely alone. There's usually a hand extended at some crucial moment by someone who believes in what you're doing. So keep yourself open to allies. The person who could open a significant door for you may be nearer than you think, and their willingness to champion you is part of the quiet architecture being assembled on your behalf. Let me speak about flow, because there's a paradox in prosperity that's worth understanding. The people who hold money most tightly, who hoard and clench and refuse to let any of it move, often find it stagnates around them. And those who let it flow, who spend wisely, give generously, keep it circulating, often find more of it flows back. Abundance likes movement. It likes to be part of a current rather than trapped in a still pool. And I sense in you a natural generosity that once you have more, will become part of what keeps more coming. Your open-handedness isn't a threat to your wealth. It's one of its engines. Watch the shift that's happening from chasing to attracting, because it changes everything about how the coming abundance will feel. For a long time, you may have felt you had to pursue every opportunity, hustle for every gain, run yourself ragged, reaching for things that stayed just out of grasp. That exhausting mode is ending. What replaces it is a quality of attraction, a state in which good things begin to come toward you rather than requiring you to chase them down. It's the difference between running after a bus and having the car pull up to your door. Less effort, better results. That reversal is settling into place. There's something you've dismissed that's about to reveal its value, and I want you to reconsider it. Somewhere in your life, there's a thing you've undervalued, an idea you shelved, a talent you didn't take seriously, a possession or a piece of knowledge or a project you set aside as unimportant. I sense that this overlooked thing carries more worth than you assigned it. What you filed under not worth pursuing may turn out to be exactly the source of the abundance you've been hoping for. So before you finalize your judgment about what in your life matters, take a second look at the things you were quick to dismiss. Let me name an obstacle that's been quietly clearing, one you may not even have known was in the way. There's been something blocking the flow of prosperity towards you, not a person's malice, not bad luck, but some knot, some stuck place, some situation that was diverting the current away from you. And that knot has been loosening. What was jammed is coming unjammed. You may look back later and realize that a certain frustration, a certain delay, a certain closed door was actually the thing that had to move before the good could reach you, and that it has at last moved. The channel that was obstructed is coming clear. There's a weight of obligation that's beginning to lighten, and with it, a kind of freedom you may have half forgotten was possible. If you've been carrying the heaviness of what you owe to others, to circumstances, or simply to the relentless demands of staying afloat, I sense that burden starting to ease its grip. Something that has been quietly draining your resources and your peace is moving toward resolution. The lightness that follows the lifting of a long-carried financial weight is hard to describe until you feel it for yourself. A sudden spaciousness where there was pressure, a breath you didn't realize you'd been holding, finally allowed to release. You may begin to notice others recognizing your value, and this outer reflection matters more than you think. When your own sense of worth rises, the world tends to mirror it back. People start treating you as more valuable, offering you more, seeing in you what you've begun to see in yourself. This isn't magic. It's that we unconsciously teach others how to value us by how we value ourselves. And as your inner valuation climbs, the signals you send change and the responses you receive change with them. I sense this mirror beginning to reflect a higher image of you back into your own life, in the form of better offers and greater respect. The worth of what you offer is being repriced upward, and you may soon be compensated at a level that finally matches your actual value. For a long stretch, you may have been undervalued, giving more than you received, accepting terms that were set during leaner and less confident days, quietly settling for less than your contribution deserved. That era of underpricing yourself is drawing to an end. As your own sense of worth rises and the world's recognition rises with it, the exchange rate on your time and your effort improves. The same work that once brought little begins to bring more, not because you're doing more of it, but because you're finally being valued rightly for what it's worth. I sense the possibility of more than one source of abundance opening, rather than everything continuing to depend on a single channel. There's a particular kind of security that arrives when your prosperity is no longer balanced on one narrow point, when opportunity flows from several directions at once, so that no single disappointment can undo you. And I sense your sources beginning to multiply. A second stream forming alongside the first, perhaps a third taking shape quietly behind it. This widening of where your good comes from is one of the truest marks of a real shift, because it turns a fragile arrangement into a resilient one, a single thread into a woven cloth that can hold real weight. Here's a tender surprise about the shape the abundance will take. It may look different from what you pictured, and better. We tend to imagine prosperity in the specific forms we've fixated on: a particular amount, a particular source, a particular kind of win. But the universe often has a more generous imagination than we do. What arrives may not match your mental picture exactly, and in your first moment of surprise, you might almost miss it because it came in an unfamiliar shape. Don't let the unexpected form fool you about the value. Sometimes the gift is better than the one you asked for, precisely because it isn't the one you knew to ask for. Let me reassure you about the foundation beneath what's coming, because I don't want you to fear it's a fluke. What I sense forming has roots. It isn't a lucky lightning strike that flashes once and vanishes, leaving you back where you started. It's more like the slow arrival of a season, something with staying power, something built on the real substance of your efforts and your growth. And because it has roots, it can be built upon. This isn't a windfall that disappears through your fingers. It's the beginning of a more prosperous chapter, a shift in your baseline rather than a momentary spike. The ground under your feet is genuinely changing. There's a deepening in your ability to hold wealth that I want to acknowledge, because receiving and keeping are two different skills. Some people can attract money but can't retain it. It comes and then leaks away through poor stewardship or a subconscious belief that they don't deserve to keep it. What I sense in you is a maturing of your relationship with abundance, a growing steadiness that will let you not only receive what's coming, but keep it, tend it, let it grow. You're becoming a better custodian of your own prosperity. And that means the good that arrives won't just pass through you. It will accumulate, compound, and build into something lasting. I want to speak about the lightness that's returning to your relationship with money, because you may have forgotten it could feel easy. If you spent a long stretch under financial strain, money can become a source of constant low-grade dread, a thing you're afraid to look at, a weight on every decision. That heaviness takes a toll you stop noticing because it becomes the background of everything. But I sense that weight beginning to lift. There's a lightness coming back, the ability to think about your finances without your stomach tightening, the return of a certain ease and even playfulness around money. That relief is its own form of wealth, and it's on its way. This shift from strain to ease is something Sarah Angel Tarot returns to again and again, because so many people carry money fear long after the circumstances that caused it have passed. The dread becomes a habit that outlives its reason. And part of the work of a moment like this is noticing that the old fear is running on inertia rather than reality. That the lean times which taught you to worry are giving way to something more generous, and your nervous system is simply slow to catch up. Give it permission to catch up. The strain is ending, even if your body hasn't fully believed it yet. Let me talk about trust and timing, because your impatience, understandable as it is, can work against you here. When we want something badly, we tend to grip the timeline, demanding that it arrive by a certain point and reading its absence as failure. But abundance has its own schedule, and the forcing of it often only creates tension that constricts the flow. What serves you better is a kind of relaxed trust, a confidence that it's coming combined with a willingness to let it come at its own pace. Plant, tend, and then allow. The allowing is not passive. It's an active trust that keeps you open rather than clenched while the good makes its way to you. I want to address directly and warmly the question of whether you deserve this, because I sense the doubt in you. Some part of you may wonder if you've earned the right to abundance, whether you've worked hard enough, been good enough, suffered enough to qualify. Let me relieve you of that entirely. Deserving isn't a hurdle you have to clear through sufficient struggle. You are worthy of prosperity simply as you are, by virtue of being a person alive in the world with needs and hopes and a life to build. You don't have to earn your way into the good through more suffering. The suffering was never the price. You're allowed to receive out of grace, not just out of exhaustion. There's a ripple effect to your coming abundance that I find genuinely beautiful. What flows to you doesn't stop with you. As your circumstances improve, you gain the capacity to lift others, to be generous, to help, to create opportunities for people around you who are still where you used to be. Your prosperity becomes a source of prosperity for others. And knowing this can dissolve any lingering guilt about receiving, because you're not taking from a fixed pie. You're becoming a node through which good flows outward. The more that comes to you, the more you'll have to give. And the giving will make the whole thing feel not just fortunate, but meaningful. Some of what flows to you may arrive through your connection to the good fortune of others, and this is worth keeping an eye on. We don't prosper in isolation. We're woven into a web of relationships. And when good things happen to those we're linked with, the benefits often ripple outward to reach us too. Someone's success, a collaborator's win, the rising tide of a person whose path is tangled with yours can lift you along with it. So don't measure your prospects only by your own solitary effort. Part of the abundance approaching may come to you sideways, carried in on the current of someone else's flourishing. Let me point to a decision that will be yours to make when the opportunity arrives, because abundance often comes bundled with a choice. There may be a moment ahead where you're offered something, or where a path opens, and you'll have to say yes to step toward it, to claim it, to allow it into your life. And I raise this because sometimes at the very threshold of receiving, fear whispers that it's safer to stay where you are, to not risk the disruption that good fortune brings. Don't let that whisper win. When the moment comes to accept what you've been hoping for, accept it. Your yes is the final piece the whole thing has been waiting for. I sense a particular gift in your capacity to recognize opportunity, one that's sharpening right now. Part of what's shifting isn't just your circumstances, but your perception. You're becoming quicker to spot the openings, more attuned to the possibilities hiding in ordinary situations. Where you might once have walked past a chance without noticing it, you're developing an eye that catches it. This sharpened perception is itself a form of wealth, because the world is always offering more than we register, and those who can see the offers are the ones who receive them. Your sight is clearing. And clear sight in a world full of opportunity is nearly as good as luck. There's a steadiness I want you to cultivate as the good begins to arrive, because sudden change of any kind, even welcome change, can be disorienting. When prosperity comes after a long, lean stretch, it can almost feel unreal, even uncomfortable, and there's a temptation to distrust it or to spend it away quickly out of a subconscious discomfort with having it. I'd encourage you instead to breathe, to let it settle, to give yourself time to grow accustomed to a new normal. You can hold this. You can adjust to having more. The discomfort of unfamiliar good fortune passes, and on the other side of it is a new baseline you'll come to feel entirely at home in. Let me name the freedom that abundance is really about, because money itself was never the point. What you've truly wanted, underneath the wanting of wealth, is what wealth makes possible: the freedom to breathe, to choose, to stop being trapped by lack, to build a life on your own terms, rather than under the constant pressure of necessity. And that freedom is what's approaching. Not just numbers in an account, but the loosening of the constraints that have hemmed you in, the widening of your options, the return of a sense of possibility to a life that may have felt narrowed by scarcity. The real gift is the room to live more fully, and that room is opening. There's a difference between surviving and thriving that I want you to feel in your body, because you're in the process of crossing from one into the other. Survival is a narrow mode. It keeps you fixed on the next necessity, the next demand, the next scramble to get through, with no room left over for anything but endurance. Thriving is wider. It's the state in which your needs are met and there's something beyond them. Margin to breathe, resources to spare, the freedom to think past mere getting by toward what you'd actually like to build. I sense you moving out of the narrow corridor of survival and into the more open country of thriving, where the question changes from how do I make it through to what would I like to create. I want to reflect on the resilience you've shown to get here, because it hasn't been for nothing. You've weathered stretches that were genuinely hard. You kept going when the returns were invisible. You maintained some thread of hope, or at least persistence, through times that tested you. That resilience wasn't wasted. It built something in you, a strength and a steadiness that will serve you well when the abundance arrives. You're not receiving this as someone untested. You're receiving it as someone who has earned, through endurance, the wisdom to handle it well. The hard chapters were not detours. They were preparation. I sense a delayed recognition making its way toward you, a reward for something you did well that wasn't properly acknowledged at the time. Our best work isn't always rewarded in the moment. It gets overlooked, undervalued, or simply outpaced by circumstances that had nothing to do with its quality, But value has a way of being recognized eventually, and I sense that some contribution of yours, some effort or quality that once went unrewarded, is about to receive its due at last. What you gave that seemed to pass unnoticed was noticed after all, and the acknowledgement along with the abundance that tends to travel with it is finally catching up to what you earned. There's a quality of unexpectedness I want to prepare you for, a sense in which the good may arrive faster than the logical mind can explain. Abundance doesn't always follow the neat, gradual path of cause and effect. Sometimes it leaps, arriving in a way that seems to skip several expected steps, showing up before you'd calculated it could. When this happens, the analytical part of you may struggle to trust it precisely because it can't trace the mechanism. Let yourself trust it anyway. Not everything good has to be explainable to be real. Some of what's coming will arrive by routes too complex to map, and its unexplainability doesn't make it any less yours. Let me touch on the confidence that's growing in you, because it's a quiet engine of everything else. As you begin to sense that your circumstances are shifting, a different posture settles into you. You stand a little taller, ask for a little more, believe a little more firmly in your own prospects. And that confidence is self-reinforcing because the world responds to it, offering more to those who carry themselves as though they expect good things. I sense this upward spiral beginning, confidence drawing, opportunity feeding, confidence, the whole thing lifting you higher than either could alone. You're stepping into a version of yourself that assumes abundance rather than bracing against lack. I want to speak to the patience your situation may still require, and to frame it rightly. You may not be at the moment of full arrival yet. You may be in the stretch just before where the signs are gathering, but the thing itself hasn't landed. This in between can be the hardest part because you can sense that something's coming without being able to hold it yet. But this stretch is not empty waiting. It's the final assembly, the last positioning of pieces before they lock into place. Trust the in-between. It's not a sign that nothing's happening. It's the pregnant pause right before the good becomes visible and real. There's a permission I want to extend to you because I sense you've been withholding it from yourself. Permission to want more without shame. Somewhere you may have learned that wanting abundance is greedy, that being content with little is more virtuous, that desiring wealth makes you somehow lesser. But there's nothing shameful about wanting a life of ease and possibility. Wanting more resources so you can live more freely and give more generously is not greed. It's a natural and healthy reaching toward fullness. Give yourself permission to want it openly. The wanting, freed from shame, becomes a clean and powerful magnet rather than a guilty secret you half suppress. There's a power in asking that you may be about to discover, because a great deal of abundance goes unclaimed for no reason other than that it was never requested. People leave money and opportunity on the table, not from any lack of worth, but from a reluctance to ask, to name their price, to request what they're owed, to say plainly what they want and let it be heard. I sense you growing more willing to ask, more comfortable stating your value out loud without apology. And this alone can unlock resources that were always available, but never activated. The request you've been rehearsing without quite making may turn out to be the very key that opens the next door. Let me describe how you'll know the shift is truly underway, because there are signs you can watch for. It often begins with small confirmations, an unexpected bit of good fortune, a sum that arrives from an unforeseen place, an opportunity that materializes, a door that opens a crack. These small signs are the leading edge of the larger shift, the first drops before the rain. So when they come, don't dismiss them as coincidence or too minor to matter. Notice them, welcome them. Let them build your faith that the bigger abundance is real and on its way. The small confirmations are how the invisible starts becoming visible. I sense that your generosity of spirit, even in lean times, has been quietly building goodwill that's about to return to you. The ways you helped others when you had little, the kindness you extended without expecting repayment, the times you gave from a place of scarcity rather than surplus. These acts created a kind of credit in the deeper economy of things. And I sense that credit coming back around, arriving as support, as opportunity, as unexpected help from directions you'd forgotten you'd sown into. What you gave when it was hard to give is returning to you now, often multiplied, often through people and channels you wouldn't have predicted. Let me offer you a quiet practice that amplifies everything approaching. Gratitude for what is already good. It can sound too simple to matter, but appreciation works like a multiplier on abundance. When you turn your attention to what you already have, the small sufficiencies, the unremarked comforts, the ordinary blessings you stop noticing, you shift into the very state that draws more towards you. Complaint keeps you fixed on absence. Gratitude tunes you to presence and plenty. I'm not asking you to pretend the hard things aren't hard. I'm suggesting that noticing the good you already hold is one of the surest ways to open the door for more of it to arrive. There's a clarity about your own direction that's emerging alongside the abundance, and the two are connected. As the fog of financial stress begins to lift, you gain the mental space to think clearly about what you actually want to build, where you want to direct your energy, what kind of prosperity would truly satisfy you. Scarcity clouds the mind, keeps it focused on immediate survival, crowds out the bigger vision. But as that pressure eases, a clearer sense of purpose can surface. You're not just about to have more resources, you're about to have the clarity to use them well, to point them towards something that genuinely matters to you. Let me reassure the part of you that fears this good fortune could somehow be taken away, because that fear can poison the enjoyment of good things. If you've been burned before, if abundance has come and gone in your past, you may hold any new prosperity with a nervous, watchful grip, waiting for it to vanish. I want to gently loosen that grip. What's forming now has a different quality, steadier, more rooted, more the result of genuine growth than of chance. You can allow yourself to trust it. Living in constant fear of loss is its own kind of poverty, and you're being invited out of it into a security you can actually rest in. A cushion is forming beneath you, and the security it brings is one of the sweetest fruits of abundance. There's a particular peace that comes from having something in reserve, from knowing an unexpected expense won't capsize you, that there's a little set aside, that the ground under your feet is no longer stretched so thin. This is different from the thrill of a sudden gain. It's quieter and it goes deeper. The steady peace of stability rather than the spike of a windfall. And I sense that kind of security beginning to build for you, a reserve slowly accumulating, a safety net weaving itself into place beneath the life you're living. As we begin to draw our time together toward its close, let me gather the threads into a single clear picture. You don't see it yet, but the seeing is coming. The door has been opening. Your worth has been rising. The scarcity story has been dissolving. An obstacle has been clearing. And several quiet streams of fortune have been converging toward a single point that is your life. All of it has been happening just outside your field of vision, in the disguised and undramatic way that real abundance always forms. And now it's approaching the threshold where the invisible becomes visible, where the forming becomes the arrived. The last thing that Sarah Angel Tarot would want you to carry from our time together is simple, and I hope it stays with you. What you've been hoping for is closer than it appears. And your job in this final stretch is not to force it, but to stay open to it. Keep your eyes soft and your hands unclenched. Notice the small signs. Say yes when the moment comes. Let yourself believe, even a little, that you're allowed to have the fullness you've longed for. And so I'll leave you gently, the way you'd set down a lamp beside someone who's been sitting in the dark. What's coming toward you was built by your own endurance and is arriving by grace. And it's nearer than your tired eyes can yet make out. Soon the not seeing will become seeing. Soon the quiet assembly will become an obvious gift. You've waited through the lean stretch with more strength than you gave yourself credit for, and the season is turning now toward ease, toward plenty, toward the freedom you've wanted all along. Stay open. Stay soft. It's on its way and it's meant for you.